Officer Michael Thompson sat in his patrol car, staring at the stack of complaint forms on his passenger seat. 3 citizens had filed complaints against him this week alone. The promotion he had worked so hard for had gone to someone else. His wife barely spoke to him anymore, and his teenage son looked at him with disappointment every morning at breakfast. The radio crackled with another call, but Michael ignored it. He was tired of the job, tired of the disrespect, tired of feeling like he was fighting a losing battle every single day. His father had been a police officer too, back when people still respected the badge. Now it felt like everyone was against him. The city streets were quiet at this hour. Most decent people were home with their families, probably sitting down to dinner or helping their kids with homework. Michael used to do those things too, before the job consumed everything, before the stress and anger took over his life. That's when he saw the black sedan with the broken taillight. Michael flipped on his lights and pulled the car over. It was an expensive vehicle, the kind that cost more than Michael made in 2 years. The driver pulled over immediately and put his hands on the steering wheel. At least this one knew the drill. Michael approached the driver's side window, his hand resting on his belt. The man inside was well dressed, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes. He looked like the type of person who had never struggled for anything in his life. "Good evening, officer," the man said politely. "I'm Dr. Thomas Williams. I was just heading home from a community meeting." Michael's jaw clenched. A doctor. Of course, another successful person who probably looked down on cops like him. The man's calm confidence only made Michael angrier. Here was someone who had everything Michael wanted but could never achieve. "License and registration," Michael demanded, his voice rougher than it needed to be. Dr. Williams reached slowly for his documents, moving carefully to avoid any sudden movements. "Is there a problem with my driving, officer?" Michael barely looked at the license. Thomas Williams, age 43, lived in the wealthy part of town, probably had a big house, nice family. Respect in the community, everything Michael felt he deserved but had never gotten. "Step out of the vehicle," Michael ordered. Thomas looked confused but complied without argument. As he stepped out of the car, a few people walking by began to slow down. They sensed something was wrong. One young woman, Emma Johnson, stopped completely and quietly pulled out her phone. "Is there a problem, officer?" Thomas asked again, his voice still gentle and respectful. That respectful tone made Michael even angrier. It reminded him of how people used to speak to his father with genuine respect. It reminded him of how his own son used to look up to him before everything went wrong. The expensive suit, the calm dignity, the way Thomas carried himself like he belonged in this world. It all felt like a personal insult. "I'll decide if there's a problem," Michael snapped, his voice rising loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. Thomas remained outwardly calm, but inside his heart was racing. He had been in situations like this before. He knew how quickly a simple traffic stop could turn dangerous. He thought about his wife waiting for him at home, about his daughter who was starting college next month, about all the work he still had to do. Michael began searching the car, tossing papers and belongings round carelessly. The broken taillight was a minor issue that could have been handled with a simple warning, but Michael's anger was growing with each passing minute. The crowd was getting larger, and he could feel their eyes judging him. "Officer, I need to ask, what exactly I'm being detained for?" Thomas said, still trying to keep his voice calm and respectful. "Don't question me," Michael shouted, drawing even more attention from passers-by. Emma Johnson held her phone steady, recording everything. She had seen situations like this before and knew how important it was to document what was happening. Other people in the crowd were also pulling out their phones now. Thomas took a deep breath. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but he could see the situation was spiraling out of control. Michael's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. And Thomas knew he had to act before things got worse. "Officer Thompson," Thomas said quietly, "I need to make one phone call. It's my legal right." Michael laughed bitterly. "You think you're some kind of big-shot lawyer." Thomas pulled out his phone with slow, careful movements. "Actually, I need to call my supervisor." The crowd was getting bigger now. People were stopping on their way home from work. Drawn by the commotion, Michael could feel their eyes on him, judging every move he made. It made him angrier. Why couldn't people just mind their own business? He yanked open the back door of Thomas's car and began pulling out papers and folders. Community meeting notes scattered on the ground. A briefcase fell open, spilling documents everywhere. Michael didn't care. He was looking for something, anything, that would justify what he was doing. "Officer, please," Thomas said, watching his important papers blow in the evening wind. "Those are confidential documents." Michael threw more papers out of the car. "Confidential? What are you hiding?" Thomas bent down to pick up some of the scattered documents, moving slowly so Michael wouldn't think he was reaching for a weapon. The papers were reports, statistics, charts with numbers that meant nothing to most people but everything to Thomas's work. "I'm not hiding anything," Thomas said calmly. "I just need to know what I'm being detained for. This seems like much more than a broken taillight." Michael slammed the car door shut. His face was red with anger and embarrassment. More people had joined the crowd. Some were taking pictures with their phones. Others were just watching, shaking their heads in disappointment. "Don't question me." Michael shouted so loud that people across the street turned to look. "I'm the officer here. I decide what happens." Emma Johnson stepped closer, still recording everything on her phone. She had called her friend who worked for the local news station. This was the kind of story that needed to be told. The kind of story that could make a difference. Thomas stood up slowly, his hands visible at all times. He had been trained for situations like this, but it never got easier. The humiliation, the anger, the fear that one wrong move could change everything. He thought about his wife, about his daughter, about all the other people who had been in similar situations but without his training or resources. "Officer Thompson," Thomas said, his voice still calm despite everything. "I need to make one phone call. It's my legal right as a citizen." Michael laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and angry. "You think you're some kind of big-shot lawyer. You think that fancy car and expensive suit make you special. Actually," Thomas said quietly, reaching slowly for his phone, "I need to call my supervisor." Michael's eyes narrowed. "Supervisor? What kind of supervisor?" Thomas didn't answer. He dialed a number he had memorized years ago, a number he had hoped he would never have to use in a situation like this. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then someone picked up. "This is Agent Williams," Thomas said clearly, making sure. His voice carried to Michael and the crowd. "Badge number 7749. I'm currently being detained during an active investigation. I need immediate backup." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. "Agent, bad number." What was happening? The voice on the other end was calm but firm. Thomas could hear the authority in it. The kind of authority that came from years of experience and real power. "Stay on the line, Thomas. We're tracing your location now. Are you safe?" Michael's face went pale. His hands started shaking. "Agent? What are you talking about? What kind of agent?" Thomas kept the phone pressed to his ear. He looked directly at Michael, and for the first time, Michael saw something different in his eyes. Not fear, not anger, but something that looked almost like pity. "Tell him, please." Thomas said into the phone. The voice on the other end spoke, loud enough for everyone to hear. It was a woman's voice, professional and cold. "Officer Thompson, this is Deputy Director Patricia Davis of the FBI Civil Rights Division. The man you have detained is Special Agent Thomas Williams. He's been conducting an undercover investigation into police misconduct in your precinct for the past 6 months." Michael's legs felt weak. The world seemed to spin round him. FBI, Civil Rights Division, undercover investigation. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. The crowd had grown completely silent. Even the traffic seemed quieter. Everyone was staring at Michael, waiting to see what he would do next. Emma Johnson kept recording, knowing she was witnessing something that would change everything. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. This wasn't how he had wanted things to go. He had hoped to complete his investigation quietly, to gather evidence without creating scenes like this. But sometimes the truth had a way of forcing itself into the light. Michael stood frozen, his mind racing. Everything he had done, everything he had said, had been to a federal agent. An FBI agent who had been watching and documenting police behavior. For months, the radio in Michael's patrol car suddenly crackled to life. The static was loud enough for everyone in the crowd to hear. Then came the voice of Sergeant Davis, Michael's supervisor. And he sounded worried. "Thompson, what's your status? We've got FBI on the line asking about your location. They want to know if you're okay and if you need backup." Michael stared at the radio like it was speaking a foreign language. The FBI was calling his station about him. His mouth felt dry, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Thomas ended his phone call and put the device back in his pocket. He looked at Michael with eyes that seemed sad and tired. Not angry like Michael had expected, but almost sorry for him. "Officer Thompson," Thomas said quietly, "I want you to know that I take no pleasure in this moment. This isn't how I wanted things to happen." Michael's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You're really FBI." "I'm a federal agent investigating civil rights violations," Thomas replied. His voice was gentle, almost like he was talking to a scared child. "I've been documenting interactions between your department and community members for months. This conversation, this entire stop, everything that happened here tonight, it's all being recorded." Emma Johnson stepped forward from the crowd. She was still holding her phone, the red recording light still blinking. "I got it all on video too," she said quietly, "from the very beginning." Michael looked round at all the faces watching him. There were maybe 20 people now, all staring at him with different expressions. Some looked angry, like they wanted to shout at him. Others looked disappointed, like parents watching their child make a terrible mistake. But when he looked at Thomas, he saw something he didn't expect at all. Compassion. "I know about your father," Thomas said softly, stepping a little closer. "How he lost his job at the factory when it closed down. About your mother's medical bills after her surgery. About how hard you've worked to support your family." Michael's eyes filled with tears. His father had been so proud when Michael became a police officer. It was the first steady job anyone in their family had ever had. "How do you know about my family?" "Because I've been trying to understand," Thomas explained. "That's what this investigation is really about. It's not just about catching bad cops or getting people in trouble. It's about understanding why good people sometimes make bad choices. Understanding how fear and frustration and feeling powerless can turn into something harmful." Thomas took another step closer. Michael could see kindness in his eyes. The same kindness his own father used to show him when he made mistakes as a child. I grew up poor too, Michael, Thomas said. My father worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. I know what it's like to feel like the world is against you. I know what it's like to be angry at people who seem to have everything you want, but can't have. Michael wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Then why are you doing this to me? Because I also know that we can't let our pain become someone else's suffering, Thomas replied. When I was young, I was angry too. Angry at rich people. Angry at the system. Angry at everyone who seemed to have it easier than me. But I learned that hurting others doesn't heal our own hurt. Michael's legs felt weak. He leaned back against his patrol car, feeling the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on him. All the complaints, all the times he had been rude to people, all the times he had let his anger control his actions. It all made sense now. I never meant to be a bad cop, Michael said, his voice breaking. I just wanted to help people. I wanted to make my father proud. Thomas nodded. I believe that most officers start out wanting to help, but somewhere along the way, the job gets hard. Life gets hard, and we forget why we started. The crowd was still watching, but they were quieter now. Some people were putting their phones away. Others were nodding as they listened to Thomas speak. Emma Johnson kept recording. But she lowered her phone slightly. What happens now? Michael asked. Thomas looked round at the scattered papers, at the crowd, at the patrol car with its flashing lights. Now we figure out how to make things better. For you, for your department, for the community. This doesn't have to be the end of your story. Michael, it can be the beginning of a better one. Michael closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in months, he felt something other than anger. He felt hope. Michael sat at his kitchen table, staring at the newspaper in front of him. His own face looked back at him from the front page. The headline read, "Police Officer Suspended." After confronting FBI agent, the story was everywhere now. Television news, social media, radio talk shows. Everyone was talking about him. His wife Sarah poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. She had been quiet for days, only speaking when necessary. Michael could see the pain in her eyes every time she looked at him. The neighbors are talking. Sarah said quietly, "Mrs. Henderson asked me if we were moving. Mr. Garcia won't even look at me when I walk by." Michael pushed the newspaper away. "I'm sorry. Sarah, I'm so sorry for all of this. I know you are," she replied. "But sorry doesn't fix what happened. It doesn't change the fact that my husband, the man I married, treated another human being that way. Their teenage son David came downstairs for breakfast. He grabbed a piece of toast and headed for the door without saying a word to his father. This had become their routine since the suspension. David was ashamed of what his father had done, and Michael couldn't blame him. "David," Michael called out, "can we talk?" His son stopped at the door but didn't turn round. "I'm going to be late for school. Please, just for a minute." David turned round, and Michael saw anger in his eyes. "What do you want me to say?" "Dad, that it's okay, that I understand. My friends are showing me videos of you online. Do you know how that feels?" Michael's heart broke a little more. "I know I let you down. I let everyone down. You did more than let me down," David said. "You embarrassed our whole family. You made me ashamed to be your son." After David left, Sarah and Michael sat in silence. The house felt empty and cold. Michael had always been proud of his home, his family, his job. Now everything felt broken. I don't understand how you became this person, Sarah said finally. This isn't the man I married. The man I married was kind and fair. He wanted to help people. Michael stared at his hands. They were shaking slightly. Something that had been happening since the incident. I don't know either. I was so angry all the time. Angry at the world, at my life, at everything. But why? Sarah asked. We have a good life. We have each other. We have David. We have this house, I know, Michael said. But it never felt like enough. I watched other people succeed while I stayed in the same place. I watched criminals get away with things while I followed the rules. I watched my father struggle his whole life and die with nothing to show for it. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Your father was a good man. He would be heartbroken to see what you've become. Michael started crying then. Not just tears, but deep, painful sobs that came from somewhere inside him he had forgotten existed. Sarah held his hand while he cried, and for a moment it felt like they might find their way back to each other. Meanwhile, across town, Thomas was working late in his temporary office at the FBI building. The investigation had revealed more than he had expected. There were patterns of misconduct, yes, but also something deeper. Officers who hadn't received proper training, who worked too many hours, who felt unsupported by their supervisors and the community. Thomas's phone rang. It was his supervisor, Deputy Director Davis. How's the investigation going? She asked. It's complicated, Thomas replied. Officer Thompson isn't the only problem. The whole department needs help. What do you recommend? Thomas looked at the files spread across his desk. I want to meet with Thompson. I think he might be able to help us understand what's really going wrong. A few days later, Thomas and Michael met in a small conference room at the FBI office. Deputy Director Davis was there too, along with Michael's lawyer. Michael looked tired and older than his. I could press charges. Thomas said directly, what you did was wrong, and there should be consequences. Michael nodded, unable to meet his eyes. I know, I deserve whatever happens, but I'm more interested in change than punishment. Thomas continued, I want to understand what led you to that moment, and I want to help make sure it doesn't happen to other officers. For the first time in weeks, Michael looked up. Why would you want to help me? After what I did to you, Thomas leaned forward. Because I believe people can change. Because I believe that broken systems create broken situations. And because I think you might be the key to helping other officers avoid the same mistakes. 6 months had passed since that night on the street. Michael Thompson stood in front of a room filled with police officers, but he looked very different. Now, instead of his old uniform, he wore a simple blue suit and carried a folder full of handwritten notes. His hands weren't shaking anymore, and his eyes held a calmness that hadn't been there before. The room was full of young officers, some who had just graduated from the police academy. Others who had been on the force for a few years. They all looked at Michael with curiosity, wondering why this civilian was here to speak to them. My name is Michael Thompson, he began, his voice strong but humble. 6 months ago, I was sitting where you're now. I wore the same uniform you wear. I carried the same badge, the same gun, the same responsibilities. He paused and looked round the room. Every officer was listening carefully. I was angry. Michael continued. Angry at my life, angry at the world, angry at people who seemed to have things easier than me. I let those feelings turn me into someone I didn't recognize, someone my own family was ashamed of. Michael opened his folder and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of him with his wife Sarah and son David. taken 2 years ago at a family barbecue. Everyone was smiling. This was my family before I let anger control my actions, he said. I almost lost them because I forgot what it means to serve and protect. The room remained silent as Michael told his story. He talked about the night he stopped Thomas Williams, about his prejudices and wrong assumptions, about how his personal struggles had poisoned his judgment. He didn't try to make excuses or blame others. He simply told the truth. I lost my job, my reputation, and nearly lost my family, he said. But I gained something more valuable, the chance to change, to learn, and to help others avoid the same mistakes. In the back of the room, Thomas Williams watched with a small smile. He was wearing a suit too, but his had an FBI badge pinned to the lapel, as part of the FBI's new community policing initiative. He had recommended Michael for this role, traveling to police departments across the country, sharing his story, and helping train officers. After Michael finished his presentation, the room was quiet for a moment. Then hands began to go up. Officers had questions, and Michael answered each one honestly. He talked about anger management, about seeing people as individuals instead of stereotypes, about the importance of treating every citizen with respect. A young officer named Robert raised his hand. How do you live with what you did? How do you face yourself every day? Michael looked out the window at the city below. Cars were driving by. People were walking to work. Children were playing in a nearby park. All of them were just living their lives, trusting that police officers would protect them by making sure it never happens again. Michael answered, by helping others avoid the same mistakes, by remembering that every person I meet is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's hope for the future. Thomas walked to the front of the room and joined Michael. The real victory isn't in punishment, he said to the officers. It's in transformation. Michael's story is helping change police departments across the country. His honesty about his mistakes is saving careers and potentially saving lives. Michael extended his hand to Thomas. Even after 6 months of working together, he still felt grateful every day. Thank you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Thomas shook his hand firmly. Thank you for proving that people can change. That's a lesson we all need to remember. As they walked out of the police station together, a familiar face was waiting for them. Emma Johnson, the young woman who had recorded the original incident with her phone, was now working as a journalist. She had been following their story and the changes it had brought to police departments. Your partnership has become a model for other cities, she told them, holding a small recording device. You've shown that even the worst situations can lead to positive change. Michael smiled at her. Thank you for recording that night. I know it was scary, but you did the right thing. Emma nodded. It was the right thing to do, and look what came from it. You two are helping officers and communities all over the country. As they walked away from the police station, Michael thought about his family. Sarah was proud of him now. David had started talking to him again. They were healing, slowly but surely. Thomas looked at his watch, ready for the next city. Michael picked up his folder of notes. Ready. The end.